So here is a collection of different animals which I've actually set up in a zoo setup, and you can see there's a lot of different ones. I'm just going to run through what each of them do and their purpose and where they spawn. And you're probably wondering, why am I actually in a plains biome right now instead of actually in the desert, especially when we're looking at all these mobs. Now these mobs are pretty loud, so I'm hoping you can actually hear the audio clearly, but I've put some of them in glass containers. You'll see that some of them have roofs which are made out of half slabs, and they have glass to block them in because a lot of these mobs can climb. Now one thing that I did is I made the snakes be able to climb like spiders, and so can the scorpions, so they can easily just climb through the roofs, and the birds can fly as well, so I had to trap them and block them in so they're contained. So that's why you'll see a few of these different stables have glass and roofs, and they're a little bit different, but hopefully you can kind of get an idea what everything looks like inside. So first we have ostriches, okay? Now these are pretty interesting because you're not actually supposed to breed them, but currently when you do breed them, they breed chickens, okay? So that definitely needs fixing, but these spawn around trees in the desert. So I'm going to set the time to day right now, and you can see there's also these desert tortoises. These actually spawn in brand new structures which are called desert oases, and I'm going to show you all the structures at some point in the video a little bit later. I am going to have to actually find them all naturally spawning in the desert. Now these tortoises that spawn in the desert oases, they only spawn in the oases. They should not be able to spawn in the actual desert themselves. And like I said, the ostriches spawn under trees, and they spawn in around groups of, I believe, 3 to 5. Then the sandfish lizards, I think they do spawn in the desert if I remember correctly, and I think they also spawn in the oases as well. The sand creepers, they spawn naturally in the desert. They just perform exactly the same as normal creepers and drop the same loot. Their health values and attack damage are a little bit different, but the damage on the explosions basically the same. But the health, I think I made them a little bit tougher. And then the cows over here, you can't actually milk these desert cows. You don't get any milk yielded from them just yet. I might add that in the future as a feature. But these actually spawn on brand new villager farms. I have added in specific desert villager farms, which will be pretty interesting to show you later as well. So they spawn with 1 to 2 villagers, and they have cows on the farm. And sometimes more villagers tend to spawn because they're only supposed to spawn with 1 villager, but you might see more spawns due to the actual structure and the blocks used in the house on the farm. So over here we have a mummy. These spawn in the new pyramids which I added to the desert. There's a lot of new content here in just the mob section, but when you get onto the structures, that's when the interesting things actually start, and I'll show you how to craft all of the things as well. So these mummies, they just spawn in pyramids. They're basically just like zombies but a little bit stronger, but they drop the same sort of loot the zombies do, and obviously they burn in the sunlight like all monsters do, so that's why I've contained them in this cobblestone capsule, if you like. Now these wolves, you're probably wondering what this version of a wolf is. This is actually a coyote. So these spawn in the deserts and in a lot of sandy places, so I thought I'd add them as another wolf or dog companion. You can actually breed these guys, and you don't use the standard bones to actually breed them as you do in Minecraft. Now you can't actually keep them as a pet at the minute, I don't think, but they will naturally spawn in packs in the actual sand dunes in the desert, so they're pretty interesting. And it's a very similar story with these desert fox kits. They also naturally spawn in the desert as well. As for these sand cats, you'll see that we have a really cool sand cat over here, which is using the same model as the ocelot. This is really cool. These don't spawn in the desert. They don't just spawn and roam. They spawn in little burrows in the desert, which are called sandcat warrens, and they spawn underground in kind of like rocks, and they just live in those rocks, and they live in groups of around 2 to 4. So these are really cool cats that you can find, and you can actually breed these with raw fish as well. Then onto this little capsule dome here, we have 2 different types of mobs in here. So first of all, you can see the rattlesnakes that are really thin. These are actually based on the silverfish model, and they can climb up walls like spiders, and basically you can just find them in the desert. Now these snakes are a little bit more rare in the desert, but they do attack you for a lot. Right now they don't poison you, but I am thinking in the future I'll probably make them poison you on the attack. And there's also the sand spider here, which is a little bit white. It's kind of like a creamy white colour, and these guys spawn in the all new dungeons, which I've added in the mod too. So underground there's some new sandstone dungeons, which are very similar to normal dungeons in Minecraft. They have chests with loot in and they're full of cobwebs and usually around 2 or 3 of these spiders. So they're another thing which you can actually go against. I might not get the chance to show you these dungeons because they are quite hard to find and they don't spawn too often, but that's what that mob looks like. Then in here I have got 2 mobs as well, but it's kind of just one mob. We have the scorpion. This can spawn in deserts, although it is quite rare, but it can also spawn in dungeons. I have actually seen this in a dungeon when I actually tested my mod. These guys are pretty tough to beat. Like I said, I will probably make them poison in the future, but usually in real life science, usually the bigger the scorpion is, the less dangerous it is. So I'm not sure if I will make this guy poison you, but he does hit pretty hard, so if you find one of these, you're going to have pretty good armor. And then there's also the golden eagle bird, which is entirely glitched right now. The skin is actually on the bat model, so it's upside down, and I haven't set up the animations correctly on the bat. So this bird doesn't spawn in the desert right now. You won't find it flying anywhere because it's pretty much broken, and you can see it's really glitchy. So that's probably not going to get added into the mod unless I fix it in the future. But the only way to spawn it right now is just by using a mob egg. So this is kind of like a mini zoo I've set up with all these mobs. These sand creepers are awesome because they basically blend in with the actual sand blocks, so they're kind of camouflaged. But these mobs are pretty cool. So that's the mob portion of things. Now I'm going to show you a few of the items, because that's pretty interesting too. If you install it and wonder on both versions where all the items are, there's no tab right now. That's because the desert expansion mod that I made, I wanted to try and just improve all of the vanilla features by adding more stuff to the desert. So I don't want it to have its own tab. I want it to just blend into the game just as if it was part of Minecraft. So that's why there's no tab there. You just find it in the creative menu as normal, like all the Minecraft stuff. So they should go into their own different categories automatically. That makes it a little bit tougher in terms of finding everything, but I will scroll down and show you a few different things. So first of all, I'm going to show you this grass fiber armor and the cactus armor. We have this grass fiber armor set here, and I just need to get the final piece of that so I can put it on. This set's pretty cool. This is actually the probably a pretty good starting off set, so you can see I'll make comparisons. So +2, +4, +5, +12, +2. So the cactus armor set, which I'll show you in a second, is a little bit better. But the grass fiber set, the reason why I made it a little bit weaker is because basically in Minecraft, if you spawn in a desert biome, there's not really much stuff that you can get from it. You have to go find cows in a different biome and then make leather armor as the starting armor or go mine diamonds. I wanted to add a new armor set that allows you to have a little bit of protection, but you don't have to go to different biomes to find it. So if you do start off in a desert biome on a new world, you can basically have the choice of playing in that desert biome and advancing naturally through it. So it gives you another option of stuff to do to make an armor set and start off. So this is why basically I'm trying to improve the desert to make it a little less useless. So what you can do is in the desert, basically I will show you this later, but there's a brand new grass block here which will spawn. This is called desert grass, okay? So when you break it, you can actually craft it into desert grass roots. So you may be wondering why you want to do this. Well, basically, if we craft it into desert grass roots, which all you do is just put it in a crafting table or your inventory, then you get an achievement, okay? Which I'll cover later. There is advancements and achievements in the mod. But when you do that, what you can do is you can craft the desert grass roots along with the desert grass, and you can make this desert grass fiber, this desert grass root fiber, okay? And when you make a combination of the desert grass and the desert grass roots, you will make the desert grass fiber. So what you would use this for is you'd use the desert grass fiber to actually craft the armor with. And it's pretty simple. It does take a little while to craft, but it means that obviously you're surrounded by all of this desert grass roots and all these plants, and you can use those around you to just craft basic items. So you can make a basic armor set. Obviously it's just the same crafting recipes as something like diamond or iron, so it's the same process, and then we can craft a set of desert grass. So this is pretty weak, but it's a pretty good starting armor, and all you have to do is just collect this grass, and you can see when we broke it we got an achievement. So then also, as well as the desert grass and the desert grass armor, we have cactus armor. And what we do is we use the desert grass armor and desert grass pieces and combine it with cactus. So we combine the root fiber that we craft with cactus pieces from the desert, and we can craft this cactus set of armor, which is a lot stronger than the grass fiber armor, and it takes a lot more damage from enemies. So this is a pretty good armor set. This is the second armor set, which is the better one of the two. and this just makes the cactuses in the desert a little bit more useful by letting you actually create armor out of it. So that's another cool thing which I added to the mod, which should make the deserts that little bit more interesting and useful. So there are a few things if you download the mod that are pretty useless right now, which I did have one or two people doing reviews on it, and they were wondering what a lot of the potions did. There are some potions added in the mod. This is what they are, okay? So these are the desert grass root elixirs, and you have a splash potion and a normal drinking potion. So you can see we can drink it, and it will add an effect on called desert spice, as you can see. And you can also have a splash potion for it as well to put it onto enemies or players. So basically it has this really nice cool particle effect, which is the same color as obviously the texture. But right now you can see the particles, they stay for basically a really long time, but right now this doesn't do anything. It just adds a debuff onto you, and it doesn't actually damage you or heal you. It has no uses right now. I will fix this in the future and add some kind of effect to this, but this is basically an empty effect right now. So that's the potions. You can also craft them out of the plants as well. It adds another thing you can craft. And there's another thing which is pretty cool too, okay? So basically, as you can see, we have a few different blocks here, and you're wondering why I have 3 different coconut blocks. So we have the normal item coconut, and we have a coconut fruit block, which is the block which will spawn on the actual trees. So when you find an oasis structure in the desert, you will find these coconut fruits, which you can mine with an axe or a spade, but it's preferred to mine it with an axe to collect it. And then when you break it, it will drop one of these normal coconuts, okay? This is just the optimal way to do it because you can't spawn the actual item that looks like this on the tree. So it spawns as a block and then you break it into a coconut and collect it. When you right click with the coconut, it cracks it into these cracked coconut pieces, and then what you can do is, if you are actually in survival mode like this, then you could obviously eat it if your hunger's low enough. And those only spawn on oases. You can't actually craft or create coconuts. They're just natural fruit which is added into the desert in this mod. The oases are pretty cool. They add a water source as well. I will show you those now, and we'll jump onto the structures now that I've covered all of the items in the mod. Now, one thing that I have to note though before we do that is, this is interesting. I didn't actually personally know this was a feature that I added. I completely forgot about this. So if you put a saddle onto ostriches, you can actually ride them. Now, this is because it uses the chicken AI and the chicken scripts for the ostriches, because you can see the ostrich basically looks like a chicken. So this is pretty hilarious. I completely forgot that this would be a thing when I used these properties from chickens, because this is basically just a chicken but with a new texture and some different values on it, like health and damage. So you can actually use a saddle and ride these and fully control them, and you can't really fly with them. You can just kind of flap a little bit and do a little bit of a jump when you run into something. But these ostriches, they're super fast, especially if you hold control to sprint. You can see I'm actually moving around pretty quickly with this, so I'm not sure if I'll keep this in the mod. One person who did review it said that they liked this feature and it was a really cool vehicle, so I might keep this in just because it's quite amusing. And like I just showed you there, if you drop down from a block, you can hover down to safety. So this is actually a really nice form of transportation if you find an ostrich and a saddle maybe in a dungeon and then put it on and ride it. So this is a really cool feature which is in my mod, which I'll probably end up keeping because it just kind of adds a new mount to the game, like a natural animal that you can actually ride, which is pretty awesome. So now I'm going to fly to a desert biome and try and find a few of the structures and show you what they look like. Okay, so these are the actual structures on the full flat map which I actually created, and you can see some of them have these item frames around them, because this is what you use to save all the structures. So these are all the structures in the original map that I created them in. This is the pyramid. So when you go in, you'll see the normal standard mobs which spawn in here. You might see some skeletons and spiders, maybe even some sand creepers that will actually spawn in here. Sometimes they'll spawn in the desert. This one that I'm looking at probably spawned in the desert and just walked in, but you will see mobs like the sand creepers just spawn in the desert or spawn inside here. And then you'll see that we have 2 mob spawners which are actually mummy spawners, and right now they're not spawning mummies because this is actually in the full flat map, but in the normal mod they will spawn mummies inside the pyramid. And then you'll find some randomized loot in here, which most of the time will be very similar to what you see here. So that's a good source of loot. That's basically what the sort of loot you'll get is. Then the oases that spawn in the desert, they'll spawn with some lily pads, and they'll usually have jungle wood and leaves on top, and they'll have usually, yet again, you won't see them in this full flat demonstration, but they will actually spawn basically exactly like this this, where they kind of have the coconuts on different parts of the tree, and then you can just break them and get the coconuts from them. And they'll have dirt around the side and then a big body of water. So this is another reason why if you find one of these whilst you're in a desert biome, it's a great source to actually find a water source at the very beginning in the desert, although they are obviously quite rare. These are the ostrich trees that I mentioned before. They will spawn with around 3 or 4 ostriches, sometimes up to 5, and they're under the tree grazing. You'll find these are pretty common, and like I said, you can ride them. And then you can completely ignore all of these fences. They're just fences to keep the mobs inside. You won't actually have these structures spawn with fences around them. It goes the same for this. This is the sandcat warren, which is usually buried at least 1 block underground, usually. And you'll see 2 or 3 of these cats that spawn inside. These are the only ways to find these cats, and they're really awesome. Then this is the dungeon, which I mentioned earlier, okay? These are quite rare. I haven't actually found a spawn underground yet, because I made them super rare. But these will usually be filled with the spiders that I told you about earlier. So I'll just spawn them just for an example, just to kind of show you what they would look like. You will see you have 2 or 3 of these sand spiders that spawn inside the webs. And then if you break this, you will actually see a chest, which will be full of loot on the other side as well. The reason they're in a box here is because it will usually be shoved underground really deep, so it will spawn multiple blocks under the surface, so they will look a lot better when they're just blended inside to the stone and the sandstone underground. But right now it's just a really basic build because it's on the above overworld. And the last structure you'll see in the mod is the desert farm, okay? So you'll find a little stable with 2 of the desert cows and a villager, which usually it won't be a farmer villager, it will just be any kind of villager, which I should probably change because it would be better just to have a farmer that you can trade with. You'll see a villager and then he'll have some crops grown. Usually it will be wheat crops, and you'll see that we have a few different crops like pumpkins and such. And then he has this really cool sandstone house, which you can also use as a home base as well. So those are all the structures in the mod and all the mobs and items, and there's of course achievements too. But that's basically all of the mods, so if you want to download it, the link will be in the description below. I'm just showing a few pictures on the screen right now so you can see a few of the other stuff in action. The link below will go to my website, and then there's also a link to the Curse download, which is the most popular mod site, so you can download it off there, and it's available for 1.12 and 1.14. So make sure to like the video and subscribe, and make sure to share the mod around so other people download it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.